This is where my internet is really tested, I think. Hi, Brooke. How are you? I love that we're dressed the same, by the
I
way.
know. Well, we're a little Steve Jobs-esque today, like really like bringing the like Silicon Valley Apple vibes to it. It was not intentional, but maybe appropriate just given the
Oh, I thought that's what you'd be wearing. So I just thought this is what I
just you were
should.
like, I got to coordinate, make sure she feels comfortable.
I think this is what they all do in Silicon Valley.
That's right. That's
Um,
right.
so am I right in thinking that you're in Silicon Valley now?
Yes. So based out of San Francisco, our offices are right in the heart of the city, and where all the stuff's happening.
Amazing. So that's so cool to actually hear that you're at the front line, if you like. Now, you've had just the most spectacular career leading to what has inspired me when I found more about your story and the company that you're building. Would you be able to describe that and explain that to people listening to this conversation?
A little bit about the company and what we're doing.
Yes, sorry, and maybe your journey there as well, if that's
Okay.
possible.
Yes, sure. So, I won't bury the lead and say that, right now I'm a CEO and co-founder of Infactory, where we are focused explicitly on the question of how do you make AI safe and reliable and avoid the problem of, collapse of certain industries like journalism and editorial content that is going to basically determine whether or not we continue to have high quality content and, positive experiences with AI. I'll obviously can talk more about that as we continue, but a little on my journey. I've been in the tech industry my whole career. I actually am not a technician or STEM grad. I have no formal training in software engineering or coding of any kind. I was actually a history major in college, uni, and I assumed that as someone who was very interested in communication and writing and sort of the liberal arts, that ultimately I'd end up in graduate school or law school or sort of the usual paths that are laid out for people with that skill set. It certainly was not on my radar at all that a career in software would be available to me. Those programs, for one, were very male dominated and still are. They were, intimidating and honestly not a place that I ever felt like was sort of an option. But I got very lucky in that as I was kind of deciding what I wanted to do with my life after school, I had a conversation with a female founder, Cass Lazaro. She actually just had a new book come out. Shoveling Shit is the name of the book. Highly recommend. And that just became a New York Times bestseller, all about entrepreneurship. But she's a very accomplished female entrepreneur. And she encouraged me to sort of think bigger about the ways that my skill set might actually prove useful in a technical environment. And she was building at that time one of her, I think, second or third startups focused on social media and the wave that was coming at the time. Facebook was relatively new. There was no Instagram. There was Twitter. There was limited sort of YouTube usage. So it was, kind of early days of that. And so I kind of took a risk and joined an early stage tech company. And that company ended up getting bought by Salesforce in a very large exit, or what was a large exit at the time. Now the exits have gotten so big, it feels a little bit quaint to think about the numbers. But that really was sort of like the rest is history. Like I was able to spend a good chunk of my career at Salesforce, learning kind of the ins and outs of the SaaS world. I actually moved to Australia, where I helped launch Slack's Asia Pacific business in Melbourne, and was sort of trying to cobble together an entirely like new book in a country that was very, very far away from headquarters, and where adoption was kind of uneven because a license for Slack was more expensive in some countries than like the salary that those people were getting paid. So a lot of complications, but a really fun experience overall. I was at Google for a number of years working on the Android stack. And then before starting Infactory, I was working at an AI hardware company called Humane, which was founded by a married couple that had come out of Apple, and had many kind of high pedigreed folks from the original iPhone team. And while ultimately like the company was not successful in terms of its ability to deliver a device that was adopted by the market, it was a little ahead of its time, I think. What was interesting about that experience was that it gave me one, sort of the confidence to go out and start my own thing and recognize that like I was equipped to do that. It's also where I met my now co-founder, Ken Kashenda, who is our CTO here at Infactory. And it's also where I identified sort of the problem that became what Infactory is trying to solve. So worn a lot of hats, been at a lot of companies, had a lot of experiences, but none of it started with being like a hardcore coder. So I always tell people, you really don't have to have that background to succeed in this industry.
It's amazing and so reassuring to hear. And would you mind, how many years are you from starting to where you are now? How many years have you been in your career to then building your own startup?
Let's see. So I'm trying to just work backwards on the math. About 15 years.
Because I think what's so amazing is to think that you had someone encourage you to move into the startup world, which shows the power of one person
100%.
who believes in you. Yeah, I mean, and then obviously you had to take the courage to do that. But then it's also 15 years, which, let's face it, goes quite quickly in our careers.
Completely.
It's quite scary, isn't it? And then 15 years, and now you're building your own startup, which demonstrates the courage to begin with, and then the courage that you're using again while acquiring all of these skills along the way. And I feel like there's a few threads there of having the courage to lean in and learn new skills in each of those moments.
Completely. I mean, I mean, to call out again the intervention of having a mentor and someone that had come before and done that, it completely changed the trajectory of my life. Like I can tell you, like with absolute certainty, if I hadn't had that conversation, I hadn't taken that meeting, I would have ended up in a graduate school program on a very different career path that maybe I would have been happy with. And it's always I always wonder what's happening in the parallel universe, but it certainly was not something that was even like on my radar in any capacity until that conversation happened. And similarly, at like the moment right before starting Infactory, I had the opportunity to work under another female founder with Humane, Bethany Bongiorno, who, when you talk about courage, I think really gave me the perspective of like, why not me? Like she just sort of had this sense of like, if you're smart and capable and you have the drive to be successful, like there's no reason you shouldn't have a seat in the table. Like there's no number of years you need to have worked. There's no sort of network you necessarily need to have. There isn't like a specific, checklist. Those things make it easier, like no doubt. But if you want it enough, you should do it. And there's no one that's going to doubt except yourself. And so I feel very lucky from like, having the courage to do these things. It really does come from sort of the individuals along the way, and particularly like the female founders that I've had the opportunity to work for, just like leading by example and, helping to kind of instill confidence that, if they can do it, I can do it.
Incredible, and more relevant now than ever, because so many people are needed to make the future better, but also need to potentially change their careers because of change happening around us. So I love that "why not me" message. I think that's a really powerful one.
Yes, completely. I mean, we were chatting, right before this, and what I was saying was that there is no one today who will not be impacted by the changes that are happening, and that can be very anxiety inducing. But it also means there's just incredible amounts of opportunity. There's never been more doors opening in terms of just new industries, new kinds of solutions to problems. You've never needed less technical acumen to kind of decide on the future. Like, that's the beauty of a lot of what goes on with generative AI. And, we're seeing startups that are getting millions of dollars in revenue with just a handful of people. That now there really is sort of a democratization of who is allowed to sort of create value and create opportunity for themselves.
I mean, I'd love to delve into that point. I want to come to Infactory as well, but I think while we're on this point around what you're seeing and this point around actually technical acumen, it's less needed now than before.
Yeah.
I think that's incredibly important for people listening to this to understand. And that's why I think the experience that you've got from history major through those roles as well to then launching your own thing is very relevant. What skills do you see in the future that people can really utilize or lean into that actually have got more value, if you like, than technical acumen for this age of AI?
So, I mean, what I always keep joking about is that somehow soft skills are cool again. The jobs that are still the most relevant in an AI age are ones that can't be necessarily replicated by a technology. And I think it's fair to assume that almost any job can and will be automated by AI to some degree. But now there is still this sense of like, when you go to the hospital, your doctor may be using, AI and robotics and other technologies to improve the patient experience, but you do want to talk to a human and you want to have sort of a, face-to-face interaction. Similarly, in my role with the founder focus, I know how important it is to form kind of the one-to-one human relationships with potential customers and partners, and speak as on kind of the marketing side. I make it a point of pride that I really try not to generate any AI writing content still, because I want people to sort of hear, even like if it is more flawed, like the authentic sense of my voice. So I think that's a big part of it. It's like skills that were previously undervalued in tech are actually on the rise. And I think a few other things, which are, I think a willingness to experiment and sort of comfortable with things, just kind of rapid fire testing and prototyping, which has always been very much in the DNA of Silicon Valley, right? Like, it's like fail fast, move fast and break things, whatever you want to describe it. I think what is interesting with AI is that it is spreading into other areas. And even within tech, it has really become, you hear about the vibe coding and sort of the culture around that. But like the example I give is our technical team here at Infactory is very pedigreed. We don't have really many junior engineers. They're all folks that have been in the industry for, at least 10, 15 years. Ken, my co-founder, has been in the industry for 35 years. These are people that have been around the block for a long time with software. But what I look for when we recruit, and what sticks out to me about this team and what we're building, is that they're willing to say, it's a new age for coding, right? Like everyone's using Cursor and Windsurf to, build, coding assistants that like just, completely supercharge their performance. Or, I use Lovable, which is like a no-code app to just create like little prototypes to show the team, what's kind of the visualization in my head. That's something that, if I had done it in the pre-AI age, would have taken me weeks of time. I do it in a few minutes. And so that willingness to sort of experiment and try, I think, has just become an invaluable skill when it comes to staying ahead in this market.
I think I was playing on Lovable last week. I was just trying to remember if, or maybe it was Bolt.
Yeah,
amazing,
yeah.
To kind, to think, okay, so could this actually look like an app?
Right.
And you've created your own app and you've created a product, right. And if you can see it, then maybe you could actually build it.
Completely. I mean, that's where, again, like you can stand up a company without necessarily bringing on technical resources. Like there's long been sort of a tradition of like a visionary founder who then pairs with a technical founder to sort of make sure that the vision is actually brought to life. Now, I mean, if you have the vision, you can make it happen. And the tools are only getting better.
Which is the point vibe coding. I was thinking actually, if I understand vibe coding correctly, it is that anyone can do it with no code. It's DIY building. Is that how you describe vibe coding?
I would say it's less about the structures and sort of perfectionism of traditional software engineering and design. And so hence like the term vibe, like you're just sort of going with the flow and letting your creative side sort of take the reins, if you will, which is not something that's always easy to do. It's certainly not easy to do if you have no background in engineering. But now, even for engineers, there's a degree of assistance. I mean, I'm always blown away now by how much faster even, the more traditional software engineers are able to move, simply because, the things that otherwise would have required a lot of like process documentation and, infrastructure design and architecture reviews and all these other things. It's like, no, you're just sort of talking in natural language, and the vision as you want to see it comes to life.
And it feels a mindset shift for those of us that haven't considered themselves builders before. I would normally put myself in that position of kind of briefing it and talking about it and looking at the data behind it, not building it. But actually, if you think, no, you can be a builder now. And I think, especially if you've been in your career for a while and you've given yourself an identity, which is, oh no, the developers do that.
Right.
Now,
Right.
I really like what you say about the mindset shift and, sorry, the soft skills being cool again, because it is that stepping into, okay, now it's about experimenting. And also articulating with excitement maybe what you've created and leaning into those communication skills.
Completely. And, selfishly, I'm very excited about this wave for many reasons, but one of them is because I've always felt one of my superpowers and what has helped me be successful in my career is the ability to distill very technical concepts into language that anybody that could understand. And that's why I've been sort of the tip of the spear, if you will, in terms of business development and partnerships and sales and all of those things. And part of why I think I have such a great partnership with my current co-founders is that they are technical, but have like a complete appreciation of what it means to be able to communicate a vision and be able to interact with customers and be able to negotiate and do all the other things that just because you have all of the technical acumen in the world doesn't mean you'll be actually good at. That's not true across broad swaths of the industry. There's a lot of sort of long-term value just placed on pure play technical ability. And I think that that's shifting. And I think that's really exciting.
I agree. And to everybody listening who's got 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years of experience that they regarded as being technical, not technical, but soft skills, now's your moment. Because if you've negotiated, if you've made things happen in your company, if you've come up with ideas, if you've been able to sell them in compellingly, this is what Brooke's talking about. So really, really exciting to actually think the AI age is more for you than you realize.
Yes.
Now, Infactory, I don't even know where to start. There's so many things that I love about this, but can you explain how you identified the problem and then also the steps to making it happen? Because courage, again, has really been evidenced here in this move.
Yeah, completely. So, it's very interesting because in the Humane experience that I had prior to starting the company, Humane was very much a best case scenario when it came to sort of frontline AI. So you have a company that is being invested in by, Microsoft and Sam Altman. So, they're getting access to all of the frontier models. They have complete understanding of what's, coming down in terms of LLM capabilities. You have all the compute power you want because of the Microsoft partnerships, not limited in terms of capacity. You have brilliant data scientists and machine learning experts and AI experts who, are quoted on some of the most important papers, in the industry. And yet, despite all of those sort of things that are sort of in the win column, if you will, or the check column, it was so challenging to end up with high quality, grounded, accurate information. And so in Humane's case, the way that they were thinking about the problem is that they wanted to replace smartphones. And in doing so, they wanted to replace sort of the Siri, Alexa-like experience where you would talk to a device and you would get an answer back. We've had those kinds of assistants since before LLMs. They're pretty familiar to us at this point. Most people use them for a few very basic tasks, playing music, asking about the weather, set a timer. What was interesting is that even those things like asking to play music or asking about the weather with using AI to get to those kinds of answers would often have weird results. It would underperform in many ways what were already sort of solved problems or sort of traditional software tools. And so my observation with that, and what my co-founder's observation with that, is that it really comes down to the ability to deterministically query quality information and ensure that that information is coming from a truly verified source. And in order for that to work, you need to have sort of the bridge between the two, right? The work that we were doing at Humane was so far ahead of what was happening in the rest of the non-tech industry or even the tech industry itself that, we were trying to call into these services using what we didn't even use this term yet, but, really were agentic workflows. And there was sort of no answer on the other end is how I would describe it. And so for us, it's really become, how do you close that gap and get sort of that last mile of accuracy solved? And how do you do that in a way that is ultimately in the best interest of the AI industry as a whole, and particularly the people who are the backbone of that industry, which are actually not the technicians and the model developers, but are really like the creators of, news content and data content and, enterprise level data and all the things that are going to power a positive AI experience.
Amazing. And when you talk about the content and the enterprise data, would it be fair to say that Infactory would it be used by journalists, or would it be journalists and that industry monetizing properly their content, so that I understand who?
Yes.
Yeah, can you explain how that looks?
Yes. So it's of the kind of the two paths that you described. It's the path, or the latter path, in which we are ensuring that there is going to be ongoing compensation and sustainable revenue for the publishing industry, versus, say, necessarily building tools for the newsroom. There are like use cases that kind of like overlap, if that makes sense. It's kind of like a nice benefit, but our focus is, there is now this plethora of folks in the enterprise who want access to quality content, but also want to have that content access through an AI-based workflow. And on the other side, you have sort of the publishing industry that is sort of the gatekeepers in many ways of the content itself. And we are trying to get the publishers to a point where that data can be monetized effectively and in a sustainable way, where rather than, the scraping that has become sort of commonplace, or sort of one-off licensing deals that, kind of cannibalize existing business. We're thinking about it more of like, what is the industry going to look like, a year from now, 5 years from now? And we believe that a lot of it is going to be about, how you structure that access going forward.
And this is why you are our first AI change maker that we're talking to, because that's a couple of issues that you're dealing with, and these big issues in the industry and with AI, one around accuracy,
right,
and the second one being about industries and this scraping issue around IP. Now, I've spoken to some journalists, some people in PR. It's actually really difficult to get I've found positive articles written about AI and when I've dug into that, because there's this overwhelming fear that we will lose our jobs, and around the issues that you're addressing. So I'm imagining you've had a positive reaction from the industry. Would you be able to explain about how the conversations you've had there, or how you're forging forward with those contacts?
Completely. I think a few things that have enabled us to foster trust with the publishers and really make it clear that we are sitting on the same side of the table relative to maybe other Silicon Valley companies. I think the first is that we are 100% not scraping. Like, there is no, we do everything through direct partnership. We are very much focused on like what is in the best interest of the publishers. And sometimes that means actually turning down opportunities that maybe would have allowed us to take on revenue, but ultimately like don't align with like our personal values about how content should be monetized. I think the second, which you touched on, is this accuracy piece, because I think for many of the publishers that I talk to, one of the fears isn't just about their content and their IP being taken, but it's how their IP is represented. So, for example, you have a publisher like The Atlantic, who's one of the publishers we work with. They have this brand that they've spent over 100 years, 150 years developing around being a trusted source of news. Associated Press has, in their tagline, it's, factuality and accuracy and all these other things. And if their content may have been represented in an LLM-based tool in a way that they feel is actually not reflective of what is actually in their archive or in their ongoing news content, the brand risk for them is incredibly high. And there's examples of, LLMs doing sort of misattribution when it comes to news sources. There's obviously the issue of just summarization. So like you point to The Atlantic again, Atlantic does long form journalism. So, they're a magazine. Their articles are not like short sound bites. They are usually opinion based. And if you summarize them, the potential to like lose nuance and lose sort of the true meaning of the article is really a real risk. And so for us, it's like we're not trying to create experiences where we're just regurgitating in an AI voice what's in an article. We're trying to create sort of a fact-based layer on top of that then can be queried for things that are sort of definitively true or not true, and ensure that they're represented in a way that the publishers feel comfortable with. And then I think the last thing that has helped us develop a good relationship on the publishing side is that we're very concerned about access, and we want to make sure that it is clear to the publishers like how their content is being used, how frequently it's being used, what kinds of use cases it's being used for. A lot of the other tools around AI right now are a bit of a black box, and the imbalance from a partnership perspective is very obvious. And so we're trying to pull back the curtain in a big way for a lot of these publishers to feel like they're taking back some degree of control.
I recently saw an interview with the Perplexity founder who was talking about, I feel as though they're doing something where they're also addressing the way that things are done now. So saying, well, you do realize that Google at the moment takes ad revenue. So yes, it might send traffic to the publisher, but it doesn't share any of that ad revenue with the publisher.
Right.
And I've always regarded Infactory as just disrupting this system that we've somehow got used to over the last 20 years in terms of Google being the gatekeeper. Is that a fair enough comparison?
I think, yeah, completely. I what I would say is, it's funny, I actually gave a talk about this, 6 months ago at Web Summit in Lisbon, but part of the talk was basically like, just because it's been this way basically since what seems like forever, though in like the grand scheme of things, not that long, it's just that internet time moves much faster than real time. But we've gotten used to the idea that large technology companies like a Google and their kind of dominance over search, like Facebook and sort of their dominance over social, they extract sort of this like utility tax that no one else benefits from. But in their entirety, there is no value to their service without publishers and without content creators and without the people that actually interact and create data. And so there's this sense of, why does it have to be that way? And if we're kind of breaking everything open because of AI, why not break this open too? And not just recreate sort of the old patterns, just sort of repackaged slightly differently. It's interesting with Google right now, how much traffic, referral traffic is just completely cratered with their AI overview product. And they kind of are hand wavy about that because it doesn't really matter to them, because of what to your point, what matters to them is ad revenue. And so, I mean, I'm sure they're worried about that too, in terms of now all of these new players that are in the game. But, publishers have an opportunity to maybe make choices that are different, that could lead to less power being hoarded just by the tech companies.
It's a fantastic vision that you have got. And I love that you have taken it upon yourself to be the one to do this. When I run workshops and events, one thing that's holding a lot of people back from AI is the fact that, what about authors? What about writers? What about the creative industries? I don't want to support something that doesn't pay back for these things. So it's just, this is why, like I said, we're talking to you as a change maker, which leads me on to the point around any insights that you would give, or maybe advice to other women who actually feel strongly about something, like the way that you felt strongly about this, and how you can actually take steps to do it when potentially you might not be from a tech background, or you think that, well, AI is just this kind of big thing that's happening over in Silicon Valley. Is there any advice or insights you would give?
Well, as I'm sure, your community has probably already, given the nature of folks that are involved in this, have caught on to, is that AI is so easy to start learning right away. Like, there really is very little gatekeeping around that. Like, traditionally, tech like, thinking about my own experiences all the way back to college, it has felt like an old boys club. And it has felt like if you don't know the right vocabulary, or you don't know, the right classes to take or the right people, that there won't be a way for you to actually learn and understand it. That has completely changed. And, you can ask ChatGPT or another product basically like what it recommends in terms of upskilling. But there are so many ways to just, immediately sort of get your hands dirty, if you will, and start really understanding the space. I think also what is interesting now is that there are problems that traditionally were too hard to solve or too niche to solve, or maybe just didn't sort of warrant the kind of attention from a revenue perspective that VCs typically look at. What I'm finding as a founder is that there's now the ability to really tackle kind of any problem. And that means that, all of us have these like experiences, the best founders are the ones who experience the problem firsthand and experience the pain firsthand because it's visceral for them. And all of us have that, whether it's in our careers or our daily lives, like inventors and founders, they are responding to their environment. And so, before, people would say, well, that will never make any money, or that doesn't really make sense as a company because you would need, these kinds of resources, and that would sort of negate the ability to do that. Now, with AI, that can be done so, much less resourced. Like an example I give is jobs like personal stylist, travel agent, nutritionist, traditionally have been sort of limited in how big that business can get because it's all very one-to-one. And it's all about the amount of hours of time you have in a day to serve customers. And the price points, therefore, are high. So you have a very small total addressable market of people that can afford those services. If you have that expertise and you have a little bit of awareness of what's available in AI, you now can scale that to like be like company level, because, you're not just worried about, oh, well, I can't see 50 customers an hour as like a single, expert in this space, but AI does allow you to do that. And completely change sort of the pricing dynamics as well, so that you can reach a much larger audience. So, those are not jobs that traditionally people think about with technology that now could be tech jobs.
It's almost, explore what AI means to you. And literally to every person, that will mean something different in terms of your jobs, what matters to you. I think that's a great point. And then finally, in terms of you personally, and it's really tricky to say women in tech and women in AI, and yet at the same time, we are in the minority. So I was wondering if we could end with any insights that you might have, or experiences that you've had that you've overcome, maybe, and moments where actually both running a startup but also working in tech can kind of reassure other people that we've got a real space at the table.
Completely. I won't sugarcoat it and say that, like you said, we are the minority. It's actually not getting better in a lot of ways because AI, while it is democratized access, there also has been, at sort of the start of the AI cycle, a lot of emphasis on research and sort of in a time of a lot of risk, trying to then, focus on sort of like sure bets, which are, certain people with certain degrees from certain universities and match a certain profile. But what I will say is that it is a time where, like, at the end of the idea, people just want to hear great ideas. At the end of the day, I should say, people just want to hear great ideas. And what I have found is that if people doubt you, if you still bring them something that they find interesting or exciting, or that's something that you're clearly passionate about, that is, at the end of the day, that, like, particularly in sort of the Silicon Valley culture, what wins out, and why, despite its flaws, I do feel like there's opportunity here for women. I am doing this with a young son who is turned 4 today. And so, I always say that, like, I'm very, like, upfront about the fact that I also, have a child. I leave the office at 5 p.m. so that I can spend the evening with my son. I hold boundaries. I don't change myself to be more, male oriented, or pretend like I don't have these other responsibilities in my life. I try to be my authentic self. And I try to just be really effing good at my job. And so, it's like that's sort of what it takes, I think, to kind of survive in this, very competitive, very intense, but ultimately, very rewarding kind of industry.
Well, the ripple effect that you're having around the world, which sounds an over exaggeration, but honestly, it really is making an impact because you're doing something important. And the way that you talk is just so relatable. So, yeah, I think thank you for doing that and also reminding us that ideas are valuable and those kind of insights that we can bring to the AI world. And on the point of your son, someone needs to get home and enjoy some some cupcakes with him. So I hope you have a great birthday with him. And thank you so much for talking to us today.
Of course, this was a delight. Thank you for having me.
Take care. All the best.
Thank you.
35 minutes. I'll end the event in the moment because it might cut you off. Thank you so much. Sorry, I went slightly over time.
No, that was great. I'm glad we could do that. So thank you.
Yeah, that's just absolutely amazing. So I'll put all of my praise in an email for you because you know how I feel about that conversation. It was brilliant. So I hope you have a nice afternoon with him.
Thank you so much. And if next time you're in the Bay Area, I hope that you'll let me know and we can grab a coffee or something.
That would be amazing. Yes, I'll hold you to that.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.